We're gonna go over some deadlift tips and tricks that I've used to advance myself up into the upper ranks of the world's elite deadlifters. This is the Texas Titan, Gabe Pena here. Welcome to my home. We're at Alpha Fit Gym, about 20 minutes north of the Mexico border. Stepping up to the deadlift bar. You gotta understand that this is a movement where the legs are doing the power drive. It's the job of the back, the core, and all the muscles north of the legs to be holding on and bracing, letting the legs do their jobs. Starting from the ground up, my foot posture, my power position is straight down from the hip joints. That's almost at shoulder width apart, but here I'm allowed to really use that squat push power off the ground and maximize my leg drive. As I go down to that bar, I don't want my shins to push the bar forward. If you can see it from the side profile, the bar is right over the arches of my feet. The arches are a nice supportive structure meant to bear the weight load. We don't want that bar drifting forward out in front of the arches of our foot. We want it right on our center of gravity, where it should be. When I step down to the bar, my shins don't touch it, my arms comfortably outside my legs. I'm able to push with the legs, keeping that bar right up against the body the whole way up from off the ground to lock out overhead. The legs do the work, the back, the core stabilizes defensively, allowing those muscles to do their job. Now with the power coming from the legs, it's imperative that all the joints, all of the distance of the body from the shoulders where the weight is bearing down to the hips where the weight is actually being controlled by a power drive, those muscles have to stay braced. There has to be a straight line. I like to tell a lot of the athletes I coach, if you imagine a machine that was made to do this job, it'd be very rigid. It would look something like a crane. A long boom arm that does not give. It's straight, is made to lift tremendous amounts of weight. We have to mimic that type of structure with our body. The challenge is, we've got so many segments of vertebra and so much mobility in the back. Those muscles have to move or shift from a moving standpoint to a defensive, a brace standpoint. You'll see right before my initial lift, my back muscles, I will lock them into place, especially the lats, to forbid any movement coming from the upper body, letting the legs do their job. And you'll see right here before I lift, I set the shoulders, both arms twisting outside, applying that tension. My back is set, push with the legs, and I've got zero give coming from any segment of that spine. You heard me say external rotation. To brace the lats, I want those shoulders rotating outwards. The right side turns right, left side turns left. My lats are pinching behind me, tightening that slack line from shoulders all the way down to hips. And with that line tightened, there's no movement, only here at the hips and the knees. There's no flexing of the back occurring at all. There's a lot of big faults that I see in the deadlift. Most of them have to stem from a lack of mobility on the athlete's own personal base. You know, we have the full deadlift, the normal conventional deadlift, where you're squatting down, right? The hips are low, a nice low point of leverage. And we also have the stiff leg deadlift, where the hips are a bit higher and the body pulls the weight off the ground. When you have an athlete that has a problem with hip mobility, something that forbids them from going from a high hip position to a low hip position necessary to execute a full deadlift, that needs to be addressed. The reality is, if you can't get the hips low enough, you're cutting out a lot of muscles from being able to execute their power onto the bar, and you're limiting the body to the pull muscles. From a leverage standpoint, you should be able to push more weight up off the ground if you bring more muscles into play, versus if I just bent over doing a stiff leg deadlift where I pull the weight off the ground. I can get by with that for a lot of weight, but if I make sure my hips are mobile, allowing me to shift from a high position down to a low, Bringing those legs into play, that squat power. I've got a lot more muscles working in my favor, and that means records fall. As far as rounding goes, there has been a lot of recent science to show that our back is very strong in somewhat flexed positions, but somewhat being the key word. We go back to what I said about picture the machine that would do this. A perfect machine that does not waste any energy is very rigid. There's no give. Anytime you have give, especially on a movement like the deadlift, where you're summoning that power from the legs to push up off the ground. If on that push the back softens up a little bit, that is action potential that you just lost. The bar speed slowed down, made your job harder. If you can keep that rigid spine nice and defensive, bracing against the sheer force of the load of that bar, you're gonna have a lot more power, a lot more explosiveness, more weight goes up. A lot of my accessory work that I do, especially with the axle bars that don't flex, supreme dead weight like a hex bar, that conditions my spine, my lumbar muscles, all the muscles that keep me straight and braced to be able to defend against super heavy loads, so that when it comes time to do the barbell from the ground, when it comes time to take a go at the world record, my back will not give. There's no wasted energy. It's a smooth, seamless power drive, max power, no wasted power. That's what I'm all about. So, do I want to have any spinal rounding? I don't. It loses my potential on the bar, but we can get away with a little bit. And some might happen without you knowing it when you're lifting in the 800+ pound range. That's just the nature of the beast. But try to mimic that machine. Think about it.